Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, I would have started this a little sooner. I got pulled into an article by the Rolling Stones that I think I want to do after this video, so I'm going to keep this video relatively quick. I just want to point a finger at something that Rachel Maddow gets magnificently wrong. And I suspect she gets it wrong because, let's be honest, she didn't all that much care. Ultimately, she was pushing a narrative and she ran with the narrative, and so she didn't necessarily want to look under the seams. And I suspect all of them were on the same team at this point. Do you remember this video? And you may not necessarily remember. I don't watch Rachel Maddow, so at this point I wouldn't have seen it either. But I distinctly remember this. I remember this for 2 points. Well, let's watch the video first, and we'll talk about it after.
The stories they posted were not the normal complaints. These stories allege that Hillary Clinton had murdered her political opponents and used body doubles. When John Mattis, the administrator on that Bernie site in San Diego, when John Mattis started tracking down the site's domain registrations, the trail led to places like Macedonia and Albania. And it wasn't just San Diego. By mid-May, an administrator of a Facebook site for Bernie Sanders supporters in California, Bay Area for Bernie.
Did you hear what she said? Facebook administrator John Mattis comes out and said they were inundated with stuff, and when he tracked these people down, they were in Macedonia. It's like, oh my God, we're the deluge Russians. They're all over the place. They're like the swarm. Problem. John Mattis was not the administrator of that Facebook group. That kind of undermines the entirety of the story. And by the way, even the Washington Post thing that she was using, in some cases they were using Mattis for that story too. Now here's the thing. Here are the real administrators of the group that Rachel Maddow is talking about, essentially debunking what Rachel Maddow is saying about John Mattis being in charge of that group, or the administrator of that group. And the person who was pushing this particular narrative, they made the point to say that guy was not an admin. The media, the media ran with the narrative without ever really even checking to see if the guy was what the guy said he was. So I have three. So I have Joan Mickelson, I have Jim Boydston, and I have Josephine. Josephine, I didn't get your last name, or at the very least I couldn't hear your last name.
Piruli.
Piruli. So please say hello to the audience, guys.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Fellow progressives.
Thank you for having us on your show.
I am happy to have you on the show because whether you're on the left or right side of the political spectrum, I think both sides are somewhat annoyed with this particular story. They pushed the narrative, and they've stuck to this particular narrative despite some of the stuff not necessarily falling in line with their narrative. And one of those things was your story, the thing that you guys have to say.
Yes.
So could you give me a decent summary of what's taking place? Meaning this guy, John Matt, comes out saying that he was an admin on a Facebook group that you guys were actually the admins on.
Yes.
And he was never an admin on this group. Explain what happened. Give me a decent summary of the story of what's taking place up to this point.
Well, Crystal Coleman, she started the San Diego for Bernie Sanders 2016 group page and made Joanne and myself admins on that page. Jim was a frequent flyer on that page, very active on that page. And John Mattis never, ever was an admin. He came out and started going to local papers saying he was an admin, and that our pages were inundated with fake news stories from Russia, Macedonia, Albania, I don't know, whatever. He was just going off the rails. And we were contacting him, telling him, hey, this is bullshit. We're tagging him on Facebook. Why are you spreading these lies? Because our pages were never inundated with this crap. We had more trouble with correct the record trolls, not Russia stuff. Joanne, I think you contacted him on email, didn't you?
Joanne, you contacted them on email, right? Joanne can't necessarily hear the
I contacted them on the links that they would have at the bottom of their pages or their email addresses that I could find online to say that you guys didn't fact check the story. He was never an admin. We were the admins. You need to contact those of us who are actually the admins there. And I repeated what Josephine said, that we did not have a problem with Russian trolls. We have a problem with correct the record trolls.
Do you hear what she's saying? We didn't have a problem with Russian trolls. We had a problem with correct the record trolls. And John Mattis, the guy who Rachel Maddow is using as an integral part of this story, is not even the admin on the site that they're talking about. It gets worse, because this guy was supposedly even pushed by a super PAC. And there's another part to the story that's amazing. When they get further along into this, listen to some of the other stuff they're saying about this. Because, look, I guess the point that I'm making here is part of the argument that they've used against Sanders and they've used against the left is that there was this inundation of Russia. And because of this inundation of Russia, you even had Bernie Sanders coming out saying, repudiating his own base, repudiating this idea that, you know, that Russians have been coming to get me, and how bad, shame on Russia, wagged a finger at Russia. And his base has been pissed off about this, because his base looked at this and said Russia had nothing to do with her losing the election. And you giving any credibility to the fact, giving credibility to the stuff, makes it look as if your movement, all of the people who are supporting you and pushing you, as if those people were doing so because they were motivated, not because of their own values, not because of the failings of the Democratic Party, but purely because Russia and Vladimir Putin was essentially pushing it and prodding them along. These people are making the point that Rachel Maddow in this is flat out wrong, and that the issue that they had was not Russia. It was not Russia. It was more like Clinton trolls. The story gets worse. They confront this guy, and in fact, let's go to that part where they confront him on this. I love this. I'm breaking this up because this video got very long when I did the interview, and so there's certain sections of the interview that I want to flag and highlight, specifically in the context of John Mattis being this kind of source that these people are going to. Listen to what else they're saying about this. They confront him, so I'm going to go to that section.
But didn't you try to contact John Mattis also to tell him that he needs to stop spreading these rumors?
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, did you contact John Mattis himself? I mean, the guy runs around and apparently people start talking to him. But at the point where you say, wait a minute, this guy was never an admin. This guy was never, he's not what he says he is. Essentially, he's just out there lying at the top of his lungs. Did you contact John Mattis himself? I mean, did you contact the person directly to say, hey, stop spreading these lies about being head of the, essentially, A, being an admin, and B, having all of these quote unquote Russian trolls?
We challenged him online directly, all three of us, multiple times, and he would never respond to anything we said.
Wow.
Then finally, one day, he messaged me on Facebook and he said, Joanne, you know that I've done so much for a Bernie Sanders campaign and that I put so much money into it. Like basically, why are you challenging me when you know that I'm such a great Bernie Sanders supporter? But I have to tell you, I looked into his record about his money. He didn't donate a single penny to Bernie Sanders' campaign. That was number one. And number two, the money, like some of the local stuff that we would do, sometimes he and I would agree to share some costs. Then I saw that he was getting checks from a private PAC to cover his expenses.
Whoa.
So,
Well, wait, two questions. So did you know Matts or John Mattis before all of this took place? Meaning, was he actually part of the group, even if he wasn't necessarily an admin in the group?
Yes, we all worked together at the grassroots level locally for Bernie Sanders' campaign, and John Mattis claimed to be one of the originators of it, and one of the people who was part of the PDA and persuaded Bernie to run as a Democrat.
Wow. Wow.
The first time I met him was at a PDA meeting, a local branch in San Diego. And he did show up and volunteer at some events. And he put on viewing parties for election results when each state was having their election. He put those on. But sometimes I think he was just monitoring us. And now, in hindsight, when we look back on all this, I'm like, okay.
Now, to be fair, we don't know if that's certain. Meaning, she was looking at the money that he was getting in, or who were supporting him, and you know, they found out that there was some kind of PAC that was paying his expenses on one hand, and she's making this point like, look, his behavior has been so off the wall. I mean, the idea that this guy talked Sanders into running as a Democrat is insane by itself. But to jump the shark and to say that he was a head of the group, or he was an admin, or originating member of the group, was so far beyond the pale. It was so far beyond the pale. And by the way, this wasn't just Rachel Maddow that got caught with this. This was Rachel Maddow, TYT, Huffington Post, BuzzFeed. It was a few people who essentially used what John Mattis was saying as this thing to believe that the Facebook groups were being inundated by Sanders supporters. I'm using Maddow because she's probably the most high-profile person on this. Maddow gets a ton of money a day, has a team that can kind of look behind the scenes on this stuff. And on this particular issue, I suppose she didn't necessarily want to look behind the scenes. I suspect she probably just didn't care, and she was looking at anything that she could throw at the wall for Trump and Russia. I'm going to put the interview at the bottom for this. I'm not going to keep this one long. I just want to challenge this thing that Maddow is putting out, that these guys are being inundated by Facebook. I mean, that Russia was inundated in all these Bernie Sanders Facebook groups. She created a reality and somewhat of a hysteria around this stuff that wasn't fully the truth. The people who actually was part of this group, who started this group, this Sanders group, who started the Sanders group, is coming out saying that Rachel Maddow's story is bogus, that she tried to contact Maddow and many of these other organizations, and none of them called her back. None of them even acknowledged the fact that she said anything. And when she finally does challenge the guy for the most part ignores her. They were friends. He ignores her, never says anything about the fact that he's going to do this and going to quote unquote open an investigation, and just kind of springs it on him. One last thing, there's an interesting part, because right here, this guy, right here, let's start here. Why he's wearing this t-shirt. He's wearing this t-shirt for a very specific reason. I think this is the clip.
News stories. We had one fake news story, and it was covered on NPR, which tracked the story from a suburb in Los Angeles.
And speaking of Rachel Maddow,
that woman is off the, she's on her, she's off her rocker.
I don't know if you noticed my shirt.
What is this, Alabama Bester?
No, it says Jim Albanian Boston. on March 21st of 2017 Rachel Maddow show, that's where she referenced John Mattis, and she was going on and on about Russiagate and
as she always
Albanian and Macedonian bots.
Wow, that's amazing.
Get a screenshot of our Facebook page
and of the San Diego Berniecrats page, and one of my posts, which was just absolutely nothing but truth, was her backdrop. And so a lot of people, even people who've known me in real life for decades, were convinced by that I was an Albanian bot.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Oh God, she's been weaving one conspiracy. Yes. The UK government has jumped the shark on the Rachel Maddow thing, designating certain people who are British citizens Russian bots. When they found out that, wait a minute, these were actual human beings, and those human beings would go into a news show and talk to the reporters, they changed it from Russian bots to Russian, what do they call it, agents or something. But they designated these people as if they were bots, because these people were given a narrative that was contrary to the narrative that they themselves were pushing out. He's wearing that shirt in order to somewhat shame the media and saying, I'm not a Russian bot. I am a person who has a certain political disposition. And what you're putting up there as your narrative of events for that particular case is just wrong. It's just wrong. I'm going to link to my video. I don't want to keep this one long because the other one went for like an hour or so. I am going to attach to this because I have two other videos that I want to do tonight before tonight gets too late on. So I will talk to you guys in a few. Give me about 15-20 minutes, and I'll see you shortly. I want to do this video from the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones piece is really, really good, and it kind of hits home this thing of how the Democratic Party is just not going to change. Or at the very least, it has not come up with a reason currently to change. And part of that is because that party runs on cash through and through, and they don't have a business model other than getting as much cash as they could possibly get. So that story is fascinating. That article is long. It took me a while to kind of weave my way through the article and to piece out the parts that I want to talk about. But there are certain parts that I want to talk about because it really does hit home this narrative of what does the party stand for? I have no idea, and I would make the case that they probably don't know either. So, all right, guys. Are you replaying in live? Oh, yeah, Fred Edwards. Yeah, I'm doing both. I'm showing a video that I did before. I'm contesting the Rachel Maddow content, meaning Rachel Maddow comes out saying that there were Russian bots that invaded the Trump camp or the Bernie Sanders camps. And then I'm showing the video with the people who are admins saying that's not true. The guy who she's saying is an admin is not an admin. That guy who they're saying is an admin was affiliated with us, meaning we knew who the person was, but he was in no way starter or originator of the group. He did not necessarily help Sanders make the determination run as office. And there were shady dealings with his being financed by a PAC. I mean, it goes so far as to say they felt like they were being observed as opposed to this person actually working for the campaign. They have other interactions with him, by the way. In the video, they make point of them confronting him and saying, like, what are you doing at one of the meetings? And he turns around and says, you know, tries to run out of the room, and all of the people in the room are shaming them, pushing the Russia stuff, talking about Russia invaded the elections and you guys are provocateurs. I mean, it's an amazing interview. But my point here, though, is the narrative and the reality that Rachel Maddow tried to create with this was wrong. That's my point. That's my point. All right, guys. For Fred Edwards, I'm up to speed now. Jamal, thank you very much. Nah, not a problem. We need a forum in addition to the internet for citizens with verified identities only and no ads, paid promotions if we believe in democracy at all. Danny Knapp, fucking hey. Bob Ramirez, people don't change. They were never who you thought they were. Yes. So-ish. God damn it, Bob. Kind of. Slightly. I know what you're saying, but kind of. And you're right, but not. Like, fuck. This video is going too long. I know what you mean, Bob. You're making a point that the amount of what we see is just exposure. Like, it's not so much that the person had changed. It's your perspective of the person. You get to see more of the person, and then getting more in a contextual view of the person, you get to know more about the person. From your perspective, it looks like that person changed. That person ain't changed squat. Only your point of view of the person changed. It's like somebody is standing here, and you're turning around and looking at it at a different angle, and you're saying that something has changed. Yeah, that's you. Your disposition to it has changed, not the item itself that you're looking at. There's a difference in those things. From a perceptual point of view, it does look like the thing has changed. From the actual reality of the thing, the only thing that's changed is your perspective of it, meaning your shift. It's like being on a train track and not necessarily know that you're moving, and you're looking outside the window thinking that the outside is moving as opposed to the train itself is moving. I know what you're saying, Bob, but people do change. I mean, let's not say just because you're right on that point doesn't necessarily mean that it's a flat fact that people don't change. People do change. People have political awakenings. I've had a political awakening. You could say that the kernel of perspective that is a particular person in the way that it accrues and does data, that component of the person doesn't necessarily change. I don't even know if I even agree with that. I was much more hawkish when I was younger. When I got older, I became less so. As I got more experience and I became more keen to the world, I became who I am. If you would have talked to me in my 20s, I would have been a fundamentally different person than who I am now, even though the kernels of my personality still would have been there. How those things were processed in the world would have been different. Now, does that mean that I've changed? You could say the workable point of view that's in that person looks at the world in a different way. If that's what you mean by change, yes. Yeah, Bob, I know what you mean. I don't fully agree, even though I kind of agree, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. That ain't how trains work. That's funny. I'm unsubbing Maddow is never wrong. Captain Obvious, fuck you, Bob, dropping the truth bombs. Dropping the truth bombs. Breaking the chains. Our brains change and grow and develop new neural pathways every day as we evolve. Exactly. he's breaking the chains, yeah, but he's saying something slightly different. This is kind of my point where I say I agree with him and disagree with him. Yes, our perspective of that event makes it look as if the thing has changed when really it's our perspective. It's like looking at the sun and the earth is moving and you're just assuming that the sun is rotating around the earth as opposed to earth rotating around the sun. Your own movement, if your movement is not taken into account, it's hard to know whether or not the person changed. By the same token, we do change. We do evolve. I mean, we do get new information, and getting that new information, you know, sometimes it's hard fought, sometimes it's implicit, but we do change. Definitely. All right, guys, so I'm going to end this because I have another video I want to do, and I want to have like 2 or 3 more I want to get to before tonight. So thank you guys very much. Rachel Maddow was magnificently wrong. Rachel Maddow should issue an apology for getting this wrong, and should at the very least retract parts of that video. They were wrong. Rachel Maddow says that if somebody comes to her and tells her that she gets something wrong, then she would retract elements and parts of that video. Well, I am opening up the Maddow for Maddow to come out and admit that she was fundamentally wrong, that Mattis was not, in fact, the admin and the originator of that group, and that her story in this, or at the very least the segment of the story that she was using with Maddow, was wrong. Rachel Maddow will never do that story, even though Rachel Maddow should do that story, seeing as the people who are the actual Facebook administrators are saying that Mattis was not. I'll wait. I'll hold my breath. I'll hold my breath. So, guess I hit a nerve. Hit a nerve in who? Hit a nerve about what? I just think it's an interesting thing what you're saying. And this is talking about, I think you're right and I think you're wrong. I think you're a little bit of both. Lorms 1. Trudy, put the timer on. See how long it takes you until you get blocked. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I just tweeted this Maddow asking her to correct the record. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Is Maddow going to correct the record? Trudy, that would never happen. I would be blown up. If Rachel Maddow brings the people I have on the show, if she contacts me and say, hey, I would like to talk to those people on the show, A, I'll be blown away. B, I would have at the very least a budding respect for a show, at the very least of trying to get it right. I am skeptical like nobody's business, but we'll see. If Rachel Maddow wants to contact the people who are associated with the story, who are the actual people who started that group and who actually ran that group and who actually know Mattis and all of the weird stories associated with Mattis, if she wants to contact those people, she can contact jamalbiz@gmail.com, and I would be happy to get in contact with the people who are actual in charge of that Facebook group. And those people will tell her the same story that they told me, that they were not inundated with Russian trolls. What they were inundated with were correct the record trolls. People who were essentially backing that house person. Jamal is going to get debied, i.e. he'll called out on her show. Oh man, that would be hilarious. That would be hilarious. This black gentleman from south, from south of in the South, called me out for so and so and so and so. Yeah, that'd be hilarious. Maddow is the reason Debbie started to get harassed so hardcore by the various platforms. I remember that, Garden. I do remember that, where Maddow kind of alluded to Debbie in her show. I remember that. I did a video of that. I totally remember that. All right, so I'm going to end this here because, we end up talking for hours and we end up running the gambit on all sorts of stuff. So if you guys enjoyed the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you guys can always support the Patreon. Thanks, guys. See you about 30 minutes or so. Thanks, everyone.